The rain hammered against the windows of Lou's diner, sounding like anxious fingers drumming on the glass. Maddie wiped down the same table for the third time, her dark eyes darting around the dimly lit corners of the restaurant. Tuesday nights were typically slow, but tonight had a different feel, like the air itself was holding its breath. She'd been working at Lou's for 8 months, long enough to know the regulars, spot the tourists, and identify the ones who seemed out of place. Tonight, 3 men occupied booth 7, the corner booth most customers usually avoided because it was too dark, too isolated. But these guys had specifically asked for it. Maddie had already served them once. They barely touched their burgers, spending more time whispering than eating. The youngest one kept glancing at his watch, and the older man, with a scar that stretched from his left ear down to his jaw, hadn't stopped staring at the entrance. The third man, a heavy-set guy with gold rings on every finger, tapped his fingers on the table in a rhythm that made Maddie's skin crawl. She tried to concentrate on her work, but something about them kept drawing her attention, like a splinter that just wouldn't come out. "Table 4 needs more coffee," Joe, the head waiter, called out, snapping Maddie back to reality. She grabbed a fresh pot and headed across the restaurant, but her path took her close to booth 7. "The moment he sits down, we move." The words struck her like a blast of ice water as she walked past. Maddie's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee for the elderly couple at table 4, her mind reeling from what she'd overheard. Who were they talking about? Her question was answered 30 seconds later when the diner's front door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. Nate Jackson walked in like he owned the whole block, which Maddie realized with a shiver he probably did. She'd heard whispers about him, the neighborhood's unofficial king, the man who handled problems the police couldn't or wouldn't touch. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe 29, with an intensity that radiated from his posture and eyes that seemed to take in everything and everyone with a single glance. 2 men followed him, their expensive coats doing little to conceal the fact that they were armed. They moved with the smooth, controlled movements of predators, scanning the room before taking up positions near the bar and by the kitchen door. Nate smiled and nodded to familiar faces as he walked toward his usual table. Table 2 in the center of the room where he could see everyone and everyone could see him. "Evening, Nate." Lou was instantly at his side, wiping his hands on his apron. "Your usual booth is ready." Maddie glanced back at booth 7. The 3 men had become rigid, their relaxed postures replaced by coiled tension. The scarred man's hand vanished beneath his jacket. The young guy checked his watch again, more frantically this time. The heavy-set man's eyes darted between Nate and his companions, while the scarred one kept his hand hidden. Maddie didn't need to be a genius to connect the dots. They were waiting for something. Nate settled into his chair with the ease of a man comfortable in his domain. One of his men approached and whispered something in his ear. Nate nodded and gestured to Lou for coffee, completely oblivious to the predatory gazes fixed on his back. Time seemed to slow as Maddie watched the scarred man shift his weight forward, ready to stand. The other 2 tensed, like coiled springs ready to unleash. Whatever they were planning was about to happen, and nobody else in the diner seemed to notice. Every instinct told Maddie to stay out of it, to keep her head down and pretend she'd heard nothing. But something about Nate's genuine smile to Lou, the way he'd once left a $100 tip when her hands were shaking from exhaustion, she just couldn't stand by and watch. Before she could second-guess herself, Maddie moved. She glided toward Nate's table with the smooth efficiency of an experienced waitress, coffee pot in hand, a bright smile plastered on her face. To anyone watching, she was simply doing her job. "More coffee, Mr. Jackson?" she asked softly as she approached. He looked up at her, and for a moment she felt the full force of his attention. His eyes were darker than she'd expected, intelligent and assessing. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, lifting his cup expectantly. Out of the corner of her eye, Maddie saw the scarred man begin to rise, his hand emerging from his jacket with something metallic glinting in the dim light. It was now or never. Maddie leaned forward to pour the coffee, bringing her face close to Nate's ear, making it appear like she was giving exceptional customer service. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice barely a breath against his ear. Nate's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. She felt him go absolutely still, every muscle in his body suddenly alert. His eyes snapped to hers, searching her face with laser intensity, finding only urgent warning. 3 men, booth 7, she continued in that same whisper, pouring his coffee with practiced ease. Armed, waiting for something. Nate's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his expression remained pleasant, as if she'd just told him about the daily special. "Clumsy me," he said loudly, deliberately knocking over the coffee cup. Hot liquid splashed across the table and onto his lap, creating an instant commotion. His bodyguards moved toward him as Lou rushed over with towels, providing the perfect cover for Nate to lean in close to his security. The scarred man at booth 7 froze in confusion, his plan disrupted by the unexpected chaos. His companions looked at each other uncertainly, their careful timing ruined by a spilled cup of coffee and a waitress who'd seen too much. The next 30 seconds unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Nate's security team moved into formation around him, appearing casual to anyone watching, but creating an impenetrable barrier between their boss and the men in booth 7. Lou continued fussing over the spilled coffee, completely oblivious to the deadly game playing out in his diner. Maddie retreated behind the counter, her pulse racing as she watched the 3 men engage in a heated, hushed argument. The scarred man's face had darkened with rage, while the younger one kept gesturing frantically toward the exit. They were deciding whether to abort their mission or proceed despite the disruption. Their decision came as the diner's front windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. 2 black SUVs had pulled up outside, disgorging men in dark suits who moved with military precision. Customers screamed and dove for cover as Nate's security team drew their weapons. "Kitchen!" Nate grabbed Maddie's arm as he passed the counter, pulling her through the swinging doors and away from the chaos erupting in the dining area. His grip was firm but not painful, his movements decisive as gunfire erupted behind them. The kitchen staff had already fled through the back door, leaving pots boiling and ovens still on. Nate moved with purpose, leading Maddie past industrial refrigerators toward an exit she hadn't even known existed. "Your car," he demanded, his voice terse as he pushed the door open a crack, scanning the alley beyond. "I take the bus," she managed, her voice steadier than she expected, given the circumstances. Nate nodded once, pressing something into her palm. A key fob with an unfamiliar logo. "Blue sedan, 3 cars down. Get in and wait." Before she could protest, he was moving again, speaking rapidly into a phone that had materialized in his hand. "Back entrance compromised. Extraction route Bravo. And find out who leaked my schedule." He ended the call and turned back to Maddie, his eyes harder than before. "Why help me?" he asked, the question sharp as a blade. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer with each passing second. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the alley would be flooded with police or worse. "I don't know," Maddie answered honestly. "I just couldn't watch it happen." Something flickered in Nate's expression. Surprise, maybe even respect. He checked his watch, then glanced down the alley again. "They'll be looking for you now," he said, stating the cold fact without emotion. Witnesses don't last long in their world. The implication was clear. She'd saved his life, but in doing so, she'd painted a target on her own back. The blue sedan beeped softly as they approached, its headlights flashing once in recognition. Nate opened the passenger door for her, then slid into the driver's seat. As they pulled away from Lou's diner, Maddie caught a final glimpse of the place that had been her workplace that morning and would be a crime scene by midnight. "I should take you to the police," Nate said, but his hands never moved toward the direction of the precinct. Instead, he navigated through back streets and service roads, putting distance between them and the diner. They both knew going to the authorities wasn't an option anymore. 20 minutes and a dozen turns later, they arrived at a nondescript apartment building in a quiet neighborhood Maddie didn't recognize. The parking garage required a key card, which Nate produced from his wallet. They descended 2 levels before parking between a van and a luxury SUV. "This way," he instructed, leading her to a service elevator that required another key card. The doors opened to reveal a simple metal box with no floor indicators, just an unmarked panel where Nate pressed his thumb. The biometric scanner glowed green, and the elevator began to rise. When the doors opened again, Maddie stepped into what looked like an ordinary apartment foyer, but something felt off. The furnishings were tasteful but generic, like a high-end hotel suite rather than someone's home. No photos, no mail, no signs of everyday life. "Safe house," Nate explained, reading her expression. He moved through the space with familiarity, checking windows and activating a security panel beside the door. Red lights turned green, and a mechanical sound indicated multiple locks engaging. Maddie stood frozen in the center of the living room, reality finally crashing down around her. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been making rent on her studio apartment. Now she was in hiding with a man she barely knew, running from killers. Nate disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a burner phone and a glass of water. "Drink," he commanded, softer than before. Shock setting in. She hadn't realized how badly she was trembling until the water sloshed over the rim as she took it. "My sister," Maddie said suddenly, nearly dropping the glass. "I need to warn her. If they know about me, they might." Nate held up a hand, already dialing on his phone. He spoke briefly to someone named Marcus, giving her sister's name and address. "My people will watch her. Make sure she's safe," he assured Maddie. "But no contact. Not yet. There'll be monitoring calls, social media, everything." He crossed to a window, peering through a gap in the blinds at the darkened street below. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Maddie studied Nate's profile. The strong jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the calculating look that never quite left his eyes. "Why would they want you dead?" she finally asked. "It's complicated," he replied, the standard non-answer. Then, perhaps seeing the frustration on her face, he added, "Family business. Not everyone appreciates how I've been running things since my father stepped down." The admission seemed to cost him something, a crack in the armor he wore so effortlessly. "You should sleep," Nate said, gesturing toward a hallway. "Bedroom's second door on the right. Clean clothes in the closet. Probably won't fit perfectly, but they're better than." He gestured at her coffee-stained uniform. "We'll figure out next steps in the morning." The bedroom was like the rest of the apartment. Expensive but impersonal. Maddie sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching her purse. Her entire life now reduced to whatever she happened to have with her when she left for work that morning. Through the wall, she could hear Nate making calls, his voice a low, determined murmur in the darkness. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. Maddie emerged from the bedroom in borrowed clothes, jeans that were slightly too long, and a sweater that hung loose on her frame. She found Nate in the kitchen with an older man whose weathered face spoke of decades of hard living. "Raymond." The older man introduced himself without offering a hand or a smile. His eyes moved over Maddie with clinical detachment, assessing rather than leering. "You've created quite a situation for us, young lady." "She saved my life," Nate countered, placing a mug of coffee on the counter for Maddie. The simple gesture felt strangely intimate in the tense atmosphere. "Show some gratitude, old man." Raymond spread several photographs across the kitchen island, surveillance images of the 3 men from Booth 7. "Recognized all of them," he said grimly. "They work for the Constantines. This wasn't just a hit. It was a declaration of war." The name meant nothing to Maddie, but Nate's expression darkened. "Mikhail's getting desperate," he muttered. "His territory's shrinking. His suppliers are jumping ship, and now he's making reckless moves." "There's more," Raymond continued, sliding a folder toward Nate. "The youngest one, Kevin Lawson. He's been seen with your cousin Ryan 3 times in the past month." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Betrayal from within Nate's own family. Nate's fingers tightened around his coffee mug, the only sign that the news affected him. "Get Ryan under surveillance," he ordered. Discreet but thorough. Raymond nodded once and stepped away to make a call, leaving Nate and Maddie alone in the kitchen. The Constantines, Maddie said quietly, testing the unfamiliar name. They're your competition? The question was naive, but she needed to understand the forces that had suddenly engulfed her life. Family rivals, Nate corrected, his voice flat. 3 generations of bad blood. My grandfather and Mikhail's father were partners once, until a disagreement over territory turned deadly. We've maintained an uneasy peace for years, until now. Outside, rain began to fall again, droplets racing down the windows like tears. Maddie watched them, trying to process everything she'd learned. What happens to me now? She finally asked, the question she'd been avoiding since they arrived at the safe house. Nate studied her for a long moment before answering. You're marked. The Constantines know you interfered. They'll assume you're under my protection, which means they'll try to use you to get to me. His honesty was brutal but necessary. I can disappear, Maddie offered. I have a cousin in Arizona. I could. Nate was already shaking his head before she finished the sentence. His expression was almost pitying, as if she'd suggested flying to the moon on paper wings. They have resources, he explained gently. Contacts in the police department, airports, bus stations. They monitor social media, banking transactions. You'd be tracked down within days, and I wouldn't be there to protect you when they found you. Raymond returned with a tablet displaying security camera footage from Lou's diner. The images showed the aftermath. Police tape, shattered glass, and body bags being wheeled out. 3 casualties, he reported. 2 of Mikhail's men and 1 civilian caught in the crossfire. Maddie turned away, her stomach churning. A person had died simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, just as she might have been if Nate hadn't pulled her out. The weight of her involvement settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. Mikhail will be expecting retaliation, Nate said. His tactical mind was already several steps ahead. He'll fortify his properties, move his family to safety, probably reach out to his allies for support. His fingers drummed against the counter, a habit revealing his concentration. So we give him what he expects, Raymond suggested, his weathered face brightening with grim inspiration. Make him think we're planning a frontal assault while we actually... He trailed off, waiting for Nate to finish the thought. Nate's expression changed subtly, a predatory focus entering his eyes. While we actually use the one advantage he doesn't know we have. His gaze shifted to Maddie, and a chill ran down her spine as she realized what he meant. She was the unexpected variable in this deadly equation. The plan took shape over the next hour, a sophisticated deception that would use Mikhail's own expectations against him. Raymond made calls, organizing surveillance and gathering intelligence on the Constantine family's movements. Maps and photographs covered the dining table, marking territories and safe houses. We need to confirm Ryan's involvement, Nate insisted, circling back to the painful possibility of his cousin's betrayal. If he's compromised, we need to know exactly how much information he's leaked. The family angle clearly bothered him more than the attempt on his life. Maddie listened silently, absorbing everything. She'd been thrown into this world without preparation, but her mind adapted quickly, noting patterns and connections in the information flowing around her. What about the scarred man? She asked suddenly. He seemed to be in charge at the diner. Both men turned to her with surprise, as if they'd forgotten she could contribute more than just her presence. Anton Levon, Raymond supplied. Mikhail's enforcer, former Spetsnaz, with a reputation for creative problem-solving. The euphemism didn't disguise the brutality implied. He likes to work with a specific team, Nate added, appreciating Maddie's engagement. The younger one is new, but the heavyset man has been with him for years. They're loyal to Anton first, Mikhail second. This information shifted something in the strategy, a new angle forming. Maddie took a deep breath, making a decision she knew would irrevocably change her life. I want to help, she said firmly. Not just hide and wait. If I'm already in danger, I might as well make myself useful. Nate and Raymond exchanged a look that contained volumes of unspoken communication. "There is a way," Nate said slowly, measuring each word. "But it's dangerous, and once we start, there's no going back." He laid out the core of the plan, using Maddie as visible bait while simultaneously exploiting Ryan's betrayal to feed false information back to the Constantines. A double deception that might just work. 3 days later, Maddie sat at the bar of the Astor Hotel's renowned restaurant, wearing an emerald dress that complemented her coloring perfectly. Small cameras disguised as jewelry recorded everything around her. The transformation from waitress to elegant decoy had been swift and thorough. "Remember, just be visible." Nate's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. He was watching from a private dining room overlooking the main floor, surrounded by security personnel and surveillance equipment. "We want Anton to see you, recognize you, and report back to Mikhail." The restaurant buzzed with the energy of Manhattan's elite. Politicians mingling with celebrities, business tycoons closing deals over expensive wines. Maddie sipped her sparkling water, maintaining the perfect picture of a woman waiting for someone important. Her pulse quickened when she spotted Ryan entering the restaurant, exactly as planned. Nate's cousin moved with practiced confidence, greeting the maitre d' like an old friend. According to their intelligence, he would be meeting Anton here tonight, unaware that his treachery had been discovered. "Ryan just arrived," she murmured, pretending to check her phone. "No sign of Anton yet." Nate acknowledged with a soft click in her ear. The trap was set. Ryan had been fed information about Nate's supposed whereabouts tonight, information he would eagerly pass to Anton. Maddie felt rather than saw Anton's arrival 20 minutes later. A shift in the room's energy, a sudden tension that prickled along her spine. She didn't turn, maintaining her casual pose at the bar, but in her peripheral vision, she caught the distinctive scar as he approached Ryan's table. "He's here," she whispered. "Meeting with Ryan now." In her ear, Nate issued rapid commands to his team. The confrontation was imminent, but not here. They wanted to follow Anton back to Mikhail to end this with one decisive strike rather than a protracted war. The meeting between Anton and Ryan lasted precisely 12 minutes. They spoke in low tones, exchanged no documents, and parted with nothing more than a nod. To casual observers, it looked like any business meeting in New York City. Maddie knew better. She just witnessed the betrayal of family loyalty in real time. As Anton passed near the bar on his way out, his gaze swept over Maddie, then snapped back with sharp recognition. For 3 heartbeats, their eyes locked in silent acknowledgement. She saw the moment he realized who she was, saw his hand twitch toward what was surely a concealed weapon. Through her earpiece, Maddie heard the coordinated movements of Nate's team establishing a perimeter around the hotel. The operation expanded beyond what she'd initially understood, with tactical units positioned on adjacent rooftops and plainclothes operatives blending with pedestrians on the street below. Behind Anton, Ryan remained at his table, oblivious to the fact that his betrayal had been documented from multiple angles. The cousin's expression shifted between smug satisfaction and nervous vigilance, revealing the internal conflict of a man who had chosen money over blood, never suspecting that his duplicity was already exposed. Maddie felt a strange calm settle over her as the pieces moved into position. This world of shadows and calculated risks wasn't so different from navigating the chaotic dinner rush at Lou's. Both required anticipating movements, reading intentions, and maintaining composure when everything threatened to collapse into chaos. Maddie didn't flinch. She held his gaze with a confidence she didn't entirely feel, then deliberately raised her glass in a mocking toast. The message was clear. She wasn't hiding, and she wasn't afraid. The audacity of the gesture clearly startled Anton, buying precious seconds as he reassessed the situation. By the time Anton recovered and moved toward her, Nate's security team had materialized around the bar, not obviously threatening, but present enough to make Anton reconsider a direct confrontation in such a public setting. He retreated, but the fury in his eyes promised this wasn't over. "He's leaving," Maddie reported quietly, heading toward the east exit. Outside, unmarked vehicles were ready to follow Anton to what they hoped would be Mikhail's location. The real confrontation would happen away from innocent bystanders, on territory of Nate's choosing. Dawn broke over the city as Maddie stood on the balcony of Nate's penthouse, watching the first golden rays illuminate the skyline. Below her, New York was waking up, unaware of the power shifts that had occurred overnight. The Constantine threat had been neutralized, not through bloodshed, as she'd feared, but through a combination of leverage, negotiation, and the threat of mutually assured destruction. "You should be resting," Nate said, joining her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The past 48 hours had left shadows under his eyes, but there was a lightness to him now, the weight of constant vigilance temporarily lifted. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing in a moment of unexpected warmth. "It's strange, Maddie. It was a lot to take in. Just a week ago, I was stressing about how I was going to make rent. And now, here I am, standing in a freaking penthouse, all because I helped bring down a crime family." The sheer absurdity of the whole situation kept hitting me, harder each day, like waking up over and over again in the same crazy dream. Nate smiled then, a real smile that turned him from just handsome into absolutely breathtaking. "You've got good instincts, Maddie. You see things that other people just completely miss. You adapt, quick, and you don't freak out under pressure. Those are rare qualities, you know?" The penthouse phone rang, and Nate answered it with a clipped tone that made it pretty clear that he was expecting the call, but definitely wasn't happy about it. I watched his face tighten as he got what sounded like news about Ryan's extraction. His cousin was going to face family justice instead of legal consequences, a weird kind of mercy that really told you everything you needed to know about Nate's twisted moral compass. Beyond the sparkling city lights, I knew my sister was being quietly moved to some fancy, super secure apartment. Another life completely and forever changed by the split-second decision I'd made at Lou's Diner. The guilt mixed with a sense of relief, knowing that my family was going to be protected, even if their freedom was now limited by these invisible lines. Later that morning, Raymond showed up with a stack of documents, new identity options, financial accounts, security protocols, and spread them all out across Nate's dining table. They looked like artifacts from some civilization that I was only just beginning to understand. The old man's reluctant respect was clear in how thorough his preparations were. Every possible outcome handled with the kind of precision you'd expect from someone who'd pulled off 100 of these transitions. The question that nobody was saying out loud hung in the air between us. What happens now? With mail taken care of and a truce worked out between the families, I was technically free to just go back to my old life. But we both knew that was impossible. I'd seen way too much, knew way too much. I was part of a world now that didn't exactly offer easy exits. "Raymond thinks you should work for us, officially," Nate said, breaking the silence. "Intelligence gathering, strategic assessment. You've got a real talent for reading people and situations." He was presenting the offer like it was nothing, but we both understood what it meant. A real place in his organization, protection, security. I thought about the proposal, weighing it against my old dreams of finishing college and opening my own restaurant someday. Those ambitions suddenly seemed so far away and insignificant compared to everything that had happened in the last week, the rush of being part of something way bigger than myself. "And what do you think?" I asked, looking him right in the eye. The question was loaded. Was this just business for him? Was I just an asset to be used? Or was there something else going on behind his need to protect me? The way his eyes would linger on me when he thought I wasn't looking. Nate put down his coffee mug, his face serious. "I think you saved my life when you could have easily just looked the other way. I think you're extraordinary, Maddie. And I think letting you walk away would be—" He paused, searching for the right word. "A mistake I'm not willing to make." That confession cost him something. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the vulnerability that flashed across his face for just a second, replacing his usual control. Nate Jackson didn't admit weakness. He didn't express need. And yet, here he was basically asking me to stay. "I'll need my own apartment," I said, decision made. "And I want to finish my degree." Nate smiled, relief clear in his face. They would work out the details later, the boundaries, the expectations, exactly what was growing between them. For now, it was enough to stand there together as the city woke up, Two people whose lives had crashed together by chance and choice, bound together by a whispered warning and the promise of something that neither of them had ever expected to find. Thank you for following my story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video as your support is crucial for me to continue creating content for.